Hey, welcome back, guys. Today we are going to narrate some r/AskReddit stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. A user posted a thread on the subreddit r/AskReddit titled, "People of Reddit who have been abducted by aliens. What's your story?" A user replied, "I'm massively late to this thread, but I have a real story. When I was young, the neighborhood kids used to play dark hide and seek or dark capture the flag, often pretty late at night. Our parents were okay with it as long as we didn't leave the neighborhood. It was the early 90s. We were basically thrown out of the house on the weekends. Anyway, one night after the game was over and everyone had gone home, my stepsister and I were hanging out in our front yard, just sitting on one of those green cable boxes talking. At one point, she stops talking and points into the sky and asks about a light in the sky. I turn and look and see it myself. The light was faint blue and was brighter and bigger than the stairs around it. It was moving in ways that seemed impossible, and it became aware we were looking at it as soon as I locked eyes on it. I don't know how to describe that, I know that. It was just this immediate feeling that it was looking right back at us. Suddenly, the light moved towards us almost in the blink of an eye. It went from being roughly double the size of a star in the sky to as bright as an airplane or helicopter searchlight instantly. There was no sound, and the light didn't illuminate the surrounding area, which gave it a weird feeling. I tried to say something to my sister, but I found myself unable to speak, and I could suddenly barely move. I just reneged, turning my head to see my sister looking very scared, also unable to speak or move. I thought I heard a noise, and the light started shining on me, which made me turn my head back towards the object, and then I felt a piercing light basically blind me. I was like bathed in the blue light. After this, things get a bit hazy, like I was meant to not remember it, even though certain moments are as plain as any memory from that time. I was in a place that was mostly dark, but there were lights that seemed to hover by themselves, with no visible technology, pole, etc., holding them up. I don't know if I was laying down or standing up because there was a feeling of no gravity or downward force in any direction. I remember interacting with an entity that was humanesque, but seemed to be different, like a beautiful person, but they had no male or female characteristics, completely androgynous, but with very symmetrical and smooth appearance to the face and body, otherwise very human-looking. They talked to me, but I was acutely aware that it was in my head and not out loud. It was like moments of being conscious with moments of haziness in between. I don't know how to describe it. I was aware that they were doing things to me, but I don't remember what. But I do distinctly remember a piercing device they inserted just behind my ear on my right side. It went pretty deep, but it didn't hurt. It just felt almost itchy for a second. And they told me they were taking a sample and depositing something that would allow them to remotely monitor me for some time. They explained that this was not the first time they had done this to me specifically, and that they would continue to do so throughout my life, and that there were literally thousands of people they were doing this to. It was a scientific study of some kind that they tried to explain to me, but I honestly don't remember the purpose. I was able to ask them a few other things in the moments of being conscious, like where my sister was, and they explained she was having the same thing done to her. I asked them point blank if they were aliens, and they found it humorous and told me they were humans from the future, but I got the distinct feeling that this wasn't the truth. Again, I don't know how to describe why I thought this. It was just a different feeling when they told me this versus the other things they were saying. It felt like a lie or a simplification of some kind. After some time of being out of it again, I became aware that my body was bathed in blue light again, and the darkness started to recede, and I was able to see the stars and the sky again. I don't know how long it was before I really understood where I was, but at some point I sort of came to and realized I was sitting on the grass next to my sister in the neighbor's yard about 60 feet from the original spot. My sister came to almost at the same time. We both immediately looked at each other and then to the sky, and the light was gone, but the sun was coming up. It was then we realized it had been hours. We didn't really talk about what happened. We just felt the need to go inside and go to bed before we got in trouble. It was years later before I ever spoke to my sister about that night, and she remembers much less than I do. She remembers seeing the light, being blinded by it, and then feeling weird, and then waking up beside me. To this day, she has explained it away by us seeing a helicopter in the sky and just falling asleep because we were tired. She won't discuss it beyond that. I honestly had forgotten about this event until 2 years ago, when my wife mentioned that I had a spot behind my right ear that kind of looked like a burn mark or a scar, but also like a pimple/mole. She likes to pop things and was dying to let me let her try to pop it. When she reminded me of it, the memories of the event flooded back into my head, and I was a bit emotional, but agreed to let her mess with it. She tried to pop it, but said nothing came out. It's still there and looks exactly as she describes it, kind of like a mole, but also kind of like a scar. I've had MRIs and other scans throughout the years, but nothing has ever shown up, so I have no idea what it is, or if anything is inside there. I try to not think of it now, because although I wasn't scared at the time, it is unnerving to think about now. That's my story as honestly as I remember it. Another user replied with their own story. It was around 3:50 a.m. I'm a night person, so I usually sleep around that time. It was starting to rain outside, and there was a loud, constant gust of wind blowing through the cracks near my window. It was eerie, and I had a weird feeling that something bad was going to happen. I looked out the window and noticed nothing amiss, except that the trees were swaying pretty violently, and that one of the trees got uprooted. I turned back and saw 2 aliens by my door. They looked haggard, and their backs were bent. They also did not have any limbs, and their heads moved mechanically, as though they were automatons. I noticed that the door was closed, so I presume they had just walked through or teleported straight into my room. They were talking in some strange language that seemed to be half human and half alien, and the next thing I knew, I was being tied up in some giant opaque plastic bag. There were holes so I could breathe. Somehow, I fell into a deep and peaceful trance. When I woke up, I was in this foreign space. I could see through the holes in the plastic bag. It was as if I was in the sky and everything was floating. Then I heard footsteps. The ringleader, I presumed, came to inspect me. He unzipped the bag, and the moment he saw my face, he lets out an audible "ew" and immediately zipped me back up. The next thing I knew, I was back in my bed. Let's hear another reply. Coming back from ice fishing, the last day of the year to have ice houses on the lake. My father, sister, and I were in his truck, and his friend was towing the ice house. We were coming around the corner, and his friend was a little way back. I remember watching his headlights disappear around corner in the passenger mirror. A few seconds later, I looked at the little air intake a lot of vehicles in the late 80s, early 90s had. You could pull a lever and get some fresh airflow. I looked at that and thought everything was glowing, like I could see all the melting snow on the floor and all around the floor where my feet were. I thought it was crazy bizarre, so I looked up to my father to tell him, and he was looking straight forward, white-knuckling the steering wheel, and all around the vehicle, there was a white light, not really blinding bright, but like all the windows were frosted, and it was daylight out. I kind of shouted, maybe more concerned than anything, "Dad?" I said this a few times, and then the light disappeared, and we were stopped just around the corner where his friend's headlights disappeared. He looked too, he shocked, and said, I think we lost Ron. Let's turn around here and see what happened." We turned around at a field approach right after the corner and drove 5 minutes back to the lake, and his friend wasn't there. Then we drove home, and his friend was there. The ice house was already backed into the spot next to our garage, and his friend seemed worried. The ice house was big and hard to back into the little spot with just one person, and Ron was already had it in place, jacked up on blocks. He said he was coming to look for us since we were almost an hour late. Traveling back to the lake to look for his friend was only a 10-minute drive round trip. Pretty sure we all got abducted that night. That was interesting. On to the next one. It was a dream, so take it how you want. But I dreamt I was standing out in a field, and there was a small creature next to me that was some weird-looking animal I'd never seen before. Suddenly, there was that cliché beam of light, and we started floating upwards into a cliché flying saucer. The inside was all stainless steel, and off to the side was a gray alien. That alien and another were speaking to me, but they weren't moving their mouths, as in it was telepathic. They started talking about my dad randomly and showed me videos of him when he was in the Navy on a ship. He was an operations specialist. They then said they were going to show me a different dimension, but I had to prepare first. I was stripped down and sent into a small room, all stainless steel walls. The creature was still with me. They told me, "She is your guide and will help you, and things will look different in the other dimension, but there is nothing to fear." I wasn't scared at all at any point in time. It felt as if I was at a healthcare facility. As the doors opened, I woke up in bed, but my eyes were closed, and I could feel a bird flying toward me. With my eyes closed, I put out my hand and could feel its feathers. It stopped flying and stood on my chest. I opened my eyes, and there was a strange bird looking back at me. It looked like a hybrid between an owl and an eagle. Then I actually woke up, but everything in my room looked the same, except for the bird was gone. This all happened years ago, but by far was one of the strangest and most realistic feeling paranormal experiences, dreams I've ever had. Okay, let's hear another story. Alrighty then, picture this if you will. 10 to 2 a.m., X, Yogi DMT, and a box of Krispy Kremes. In my need-to-know post, just outside of Area 51, contemplating the whole chosen people thingy, when just a flaming stealth banana split the sky, like one would hope, but never really expect to see in a place like this, cutting right-angle donuts on a dime, and stopping right on my Birkenstocks and me yelping, "Holy fuck shit!" Then the X-Files looking like some kind of blue-green Jackie Chan with Isabella Rossellini lips and breath that reeked of vanilla Chig Champa, did a slow-mo matrix descent out of the butt end of the banana vessel and hovered above my bug eyes, my gaping jaw, my sweaty L. Ron Hubbard upper lip, and all I could think was, I hope Uncle Martin here doesn't notice that I pissed my fucking pants. So light in his way, like an apparition. He had me crying out, "F me, it's gotta be the deadhead chemistry. The blotter got right on top of me. Got me seeing motherfucking T." And after calming me down with some orange slices and some fetal spooning, E.T. revealed to me his singular purpose. He said, "You are the chosen one, the one who will deliver the message. A message of hope for those who choose to hear it, and a warning for those who do not. Me, the chosen one, they chose me. And I didn't graduate from high school." Then he looked right through me with somniferous almond eyes. Don't even know what that means. Must remember to write it down. This is so real, like the time Dave floated away. See, my heart is pounding because this shit never happens to me. Can't breathe right now. It was so real, like I woke up in Wonderland, all sort of terrifying. I don't want to be all alone when I tell this story. And can anyone tell me why you all sound like Peanut's parents? Will I ever be coming down? This is so real, finally. It's my lucky day. See, my heart is racing because this shit never happens to me. Can't breathe right now. You believe me, don't you? Please believe what I just said. See, the dead ain't touring, and this wasn't all in my head. See, they took me by the hand and invited me right in. Then they showed me something. I don't even know where to begin. Strapped down to my bed, feet cold and eyes red. I'm out of my head. Am I alive? Am I dead? Can't remember what they said. Goddamn shit, the bed. Overwhelmed, as one would be, placed in my position. Such a heavy burden now to be the one, born to bear and read to all the details of our ending. To write it down for all the world to see. But I forgot my pen. Shit the bed again. Typical. Strapped down on my bed, feet cold and eyes red. I'm out of my head. Am I alive? Am I dead? Sun-kissed and Sudafed, gyroscopes and infrared. Won't help, I'm brain dead. I can't remember what they said. Goddamn shit the bed. Okay, let's hear one more. I was driving home from work late one night when I saw a bright light in the sky. I pulled over to the side of the road to get a better look, and as I watched, the light grew larger and larger. Suddenly, a spaceship appeared out of nowhere and landed in the field next to me. I I was terrified, but I couldn't move. I just stood there as the door of the spaceship opened and a group of aliens emerged. They were tall and slender, with big heads and big eyes. They were wearing silver suits that covered their entire bodies. One of the aliens stepped forward and spoke to me in a language that I didn't understand. I tried to answer, but no words came out. I was too scared to speak. The alien gestured for me to follow them, and I did. They led me into the spaceship, and then they took me to a small room. The room was filled with strange equipment that I didn't recognize. The aliens strapped me to a table, and then they started to run tests on me. They took blood samples, they scanned my brain, and they even took a biopsy of my skin. I was in pain, but I didn't dare to complain. After a few hours, the aliens finally finished their tests. They untied me from the table and led me back to the door of the spaceship. "Thank you for your cooperation," the alien said. "We will now return you to your home." I stepped out of the spaceship and looked around. I was back in the field next to my car. The spaceship was gone. I got in my car and drove away. As I drove, I thought about what had just happened. I was still scared, but I was also curious. What had the aliens been doing to me? Why had they taken me? I never found out the answers to those questions, but a few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the aliens, and it said, "Dear human, we apologize for the inconvenience we caused you. We were simply conducting a routine medical examination. We have no ill intentions towards your species. In return for your cooperation, we would like to request a small payment of $3.50. This is to cover the cost of the medical supplies we used. Thank you for your understanding. Sincerely, the aliens." Okay, that was rather amusing. I don't think the user meant to be serious with that story, but anyway, let's hear another. Late one evening, I was walking home from work. I noticed a peculiar light piercing through the night sky. It was a radiant beam, hypnotizing in its brilliance. Curiosity compelled me to follow its path, my steps guided by an inexplicable force. The light led me to a secluded field on the outskirts of town, where a massive, shimmering spaceship hovered above the ground. With my heart pounding in my chest, I approached the vessel. A hatch opened, revealing a group of otherworldly beings, their ethereal forms bathed in an otherworldly glow. They beckoned me to step aboard, their intentions veiled in mystery. I hesitated, my mind filled with questions and doubts. One of the beings extended a hand towards me. I placed my hand in theirs, and the beings guided him into the spaceship. Inside, my senses were assaulted by a symphony of colors, sounds, and unfamiliar scents. The aliens, with their elongated limbs and radiant eyes, communicated with me in a language beyond words. They showed me many wondrous things. As I and the aliens prepared to part ways, I mustered the courage to ask, "Why did you choose me? What was the purpose of this extraordinary encounter?" The aliens regarded me. Then one uttered, "Don't let this distract you from the fact that in 1998, The Undertaker threw mankind off hell in a cell and plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table. I still don't know what the encounter was about." Okay, let's hear one last reply. One Thanksgiving, I ended up staying with my grandparents afterwards. I would regularly do this for a week or so. My mom, dad, and 2 younger brothers drove over an hour home. On a section of country highway, they saw lights overhead. They said it was a huge triangular shape with lights around the edges. It was silent, but super low, like a few hundred feet above them. They said it was so massive it almost blocked out the sky, except where they could see the lights on the side. My dad wanted a better look, so he pulled over and had my mom drive. They kept going for a while and it was still right on top of them. Eventually, they stopped to switch drivers again to buy other cars pulled over with them. My parents and the people in the other cars got out and watched for a bit before whatever it was disappeared in the blink of an eye. They ended up getting back in the car and driving home. When they got home, they were shocked because it was after 2 a.m. Even with driving slow to watch the thing, they should have made it home by 10 p.m. I would chalk it up to them playing a prank on me, but that would be really out of character for them. At the time, my dad was a state employee and had been for over a decade. He is very serious when it comes to being honest. They all had the exact same story, and even now, 15 years after it happened, they recount it the same. My mom swears it's one of the most amazing things that has happened to her, and she's been through some crazy shit. My dad will talk about it a bit, but he starts to get really bothered and doesn't want to keep talking about it. They weren't on drugs or drinking that night, and I have no reason to doubt them. I think what bothers my dad so much is the 4 or 5 hours that are just gone. He wasn't in control and can't remember. He wasn't protecting his wife and kids. It really upsets him if you try to get him to talk about it in depth. I shot my stalker tonight, Reddit story in real life. Concluded, I am not the original poster. That was a user by the name of It's Mrs. Steal Yo Cat. She posted in r/self 10 years ago and has since deleted her account. Original post, September the 24th, 2014. Title, Anyone had success with private investigators? For the past 6 months, I have been relentlessly stalked and had threats against my life made from someone I dated for a month. It started with phone calls upwards of 45, 50 a day, 50-page text messages, and him showing up outside of my house at 5 a.m. When I wouldn't not comply or feed the negative attention, I began to receive threats, claims that he would murder me and get away with it. All he would have to do is flee the country, telling me he shouldn't have to force me to be his friend or give him another chance or else. Every time I blocked his number from contacting me, he would then call me from different ones, try and pretend to be other people, or have his friends, or sometimes even random strangers he'd ask on the street. I once scared an unsuspecting guy half to death after informing him that the person who had just told him to call me was actually stalking me, and I sent him proof. He ended up calling the police on him. He fled, of course. After about 2 months of that, I was evicted from my apartment building due to my neighbors no longer feeling safe because of his looming presence. I then applied for, and was granted, a TPO. A few days afterwards, I received a picture message of the note the sheriff's civil had left on the door of my stalker's then residence, with a message taunting me that what you are trying to do is stupid and a restraining order is just a piece of paper. So ultimately, he just ended up avoiding the process server, and simple as that, I was not being protected at all. May 31st of this year, I relocated. This did not deter my stalker. He vowed to find wherever I moved to and threatened that if he couldn't find me, he would be able to find my family, and then proceeded to send me a map of my mother's home, whom he had never met. I received a message from a woman claiming to be my former landlord, letting me know that I owed a balance on my account, and to avoid late fees I needed to pay the amount, which I could do with the link provided in the message. Turns out it was my stalker pretending to be a woman, and the link turned out to be a tool used to grab the user's IP address when they clicked the link. Upon this discovery, I changed my phone number and began to systematically dismantle any trace of an online presence I once had. This action only seemed to anger him, and before deleting the profiles outright, I would attempt to block him from contacting me. Each and every time I blocked one, he simply created a new one and proceeded to contact me as if nothing had happened. 12 different Reddit accounts, 9 different Tumblrs, 10 different Instagrams, 3 meetup accounts, 4 Facebooks, with which he changed his location to that of my hometown and proceeded to add nearly everyone from my graduating class in high school, and even 3 Duolingo accounts in MySpace. Yes, MySpace. I then received an empty package from him addressed to my former residence with the declaration, "Address correction requested. Do not forward." I'm assuming he thought that the post office would adhere to his requests and return the package to him with my new corrected address on it. Mid-July, he created a profile using my photos and likeness to threaten my family. When I didn't respond, he proceeded to post semi-nude pictures of me on the profile and attempted to blackmail me into speaking with him. I did not, and contacted Twitter to report the account and have it removed, which they eventually did. On the 21st of August, 2014, I awoke around 8 p.m. to vigorous knocking and ringing of my doorbell. I look out my window to see who it is, and I was horrified to see my stalker there. I called the police, and of course, he fled once again. Over 7 separate police reports filed. This incident was followed by threatening emails from my stalker, demanding that I meet him somewhere, or because he had found me that next time I would wake up to gunshots, and that if I didn't, he would first taser you and rape you in the ass, using your boyfriend's blood as lube. This past Sunday night, I woke up at 6:45 a.m. to the ringing and banging again. I proceeded to record him on video while I was on the phone with the police. He fled on foot once again, and I was hit with the same hoopla from law enforcement. Well, we can't really do much because technically at this point he's not doing anything wrong. Then why does he flee, I wonder? I obtained a TPO again, but I have no solid address for this dangerous person, which is why I am in dire need of a private investigator to assist with finding said residence so this person can be served. I hope you might be able to refer me to someone who might be able to assist me. I've developed insomnia, depression, anxiety, and paranoia. I am completely isolated. I am 22 years old, and I have no social life anymore. I have 0 friends. I've become a shell of my former self. I faced eviction and lost a job because of this man's behavior, and I don't know how much longer I can survive. There's actually so much more filler shit that he has done to terrorize me, but for the sake of this already lengthy post, I tried to condense it. I have proof in the form of recordings, event diaries, and copies of all of his threats, interactions, and attempts to communicate, and would be more than willing to email them to show I'm not lying. I am an LV, if that helps at all. People overuse the word stalking so much these days that no one takes it seriously anymore. As soon as someone doesn't like someone anymore, they call them a stalker. This isn't staring at your ex's new lover's timeline longer than you healthily should. This is the real scared to sleep at night deal. I have felt the fear before, and it's eating away at me. I need help, badly. Whoever has gilded me gold, wow. Thank you so much, as pathetic as it may seem. Redditors and Ambience have seriously been one of my only sources of comfort and human interaction for the past few months. You've no idea how much these communities helped out my constant sadness. I see you all. You guys seriously rock. Thanks for being here for me. Sage. Relevant comments. Commenter. Can you post the video? OOP. Yes, but I'm on the phone with the police during the video. I'm not 100% sure how to blurt out certain information like my address and my phone number from the audio in the video. OOP comments on September 27th, 3 days later. Vision commenter. Damn, I remember talking to an old friend of mine from Vegas who was saying she'll get a CCW soon. I kind of think I should forward this to her. Soon just doesn't seem soon enough. Oopie. Do it. My gun saved my life. Update post. Deleted, recovered with Imgur post from September the 26th, 2014, 2 days from OG post. Nay, Reddit post October 8th, 2014, 2 weeks from OG post. And image description, a photo of the slightly open door. The chair is in front, pushed to the side. Black paint is covering the side of the door that has been busted in. Arrows, most likely from crime scene units, are stuck to the door, pointing to individual spots. I'm writing this staring at the mess the police left for me in a bit of a fog. After 6 months of stalking and threats against my life, my stalker finally snapped and decided to kick my door in and make good on his promise. Out of fear, the past month I had begun sleeping with a chair propped against my front door, to give myself a few extra precious seconds in case of emergency. I shudder to think how differently things might have turned out had I not barricaded the door. I awoke around 1:15 a.m. to the sound of the door giving way after one kick, followed by the sounds of my stalker struggling to dislodge the chair while forcing his way inside. I jumped up and grabbed the gun I've learned to do everything, even shower with. I stood at the top of my stairs and fired twice. Hitting him in the chest, I hear his scream. His disbelief that I'd stood up for myself. 0 to 100 in milliseconds. I've never been so afraid in my life. I do not know if he is living, but I do know the police have him, and that's what helps the most. For months of him evading the police, I began to question whether he was unstoppable, untraceable. Houdini, he would murder me and get away with it. As of now, I'm in a haze of guilt, surprise, relief, and disbelief. I shook as the canines dragged him out from his hiding place under a bush. I survived, where so many people do not. Holy shit, I survived. Edit. The outpouring of support is wild. I can't thank you guys enough. Everyone can be a critic, and the fact still remains. You don't know what you will do in a situation until it's presented in front of you. Those who believe there was other things to be done have never had someone tell you that you no longer deserve to draw breath and mean it. And for the should have fired a warning shot, folks. There are no warning shots. A gun is a deadly force. You only pull that trigger if you're in fear for your life, and all other methods of deterring are gone. When he kicked my door in, there was no longer a deterrent preventing harm. Warning shots are dangerous and could hurt the unintended. This is not a Wild West movie. That's what responsible gun ownership is. It'll update once things have calmed down a bit, I promise. It'll write back to everyone, and after being isolated for so long, anyone who wants to be friends, I am always accepting those. Link to news article, October 2nd, 2014, Las Vegas NV. A woman shot her stalker after he kicked in her back door. She had been living in fear, showering with a gun, and propping a chair up against her door for just this sort of situation. Her post to Reddit made the story go viral. She writes, "I'm writing this staring at the mess the police left for me in a bit of a fog. After 6 months of stalking and threats against my life, my stalker finally snapped and decided to kick my door in and make good on his promise. Out of fear, the past month, I had begun sleeping with a chair propped against my front door to give myself a few extra precious seconds in case of emergency. I shudder to think how differently things might have turned out had I not barricaded the door." Police say former boyfriend Douglas Eugene Jackson, 22, kicked in her door at around 1 a.m. last Friday. "I awoke around 1:15 a.m. to the sound of the door giving way after one kick, followed by the sounds of my stalker struggling to dislodge the chair while forcing his way inside. I jumped up and grabbed the gun I've learned to do everything, even shower with. I stood at the top of my stairs and fired twice. Hitting him in the chest, I hear his scream, his disbelief that I'd stood up for myself," said the victim in a blog post. KVVU-TV reports that Jackson left the scene and tried to hide in some bushes. Police dogs quickly found the stalker. He was treated for his injuries at University Medical Center of Southern Nevada. Jackson now faces charges of home invasion and aggravated stalking. For months of him evading the police, I began to question whether he was unstoppable, untraceable. Houdini, he would murder me and get away with it. As of now, I'm in a haze of guilt, surprise, relief, and disbelief. I shook as the canines drag him out from his hiding place under a bush. The victim writes in a post to Imgur. The victim does not wish to be identified, has saved many threatening texts and social media posts from her stalker. She says he forced her to move, obtain a restraining order, and acquire a license to carry a concealed weapon. The victim followed up with a note. The outpouring of support is wild. I can't thank you guys enough. Everyone can be a critic, and the fact still remains. You don't know what you will do in a situation until it's presented in front of you. Those who believe there was other things to be done have never had someone tell you that you no longer deserve to draw breath and mean it. And for the should be fired a warning shot, folks. There are no warning shots. A gun is a deadly force. You only pull that trigger if you are in fear for your life, and all other methods of deterring are gone. When he kicked my door in, there was no longer a deterrent preventing harm. Warning shots are dangerous and could hurt the unintended. This is not a Wild West movie. That's what responsible gun ownership is. Daily Mail has an article on the case, along with text evidence submitted by OOP. Update on case in 2020. An article 6 years later. Editor's note. This is 6 years after the original events, but is the same man. He did this to a different woman in 2019 while on parole. They refer to OOP as the former girlfriend in Las Vegas, even though she only went on 2 dates with him. Reno, Nevada. A Nevada man has been sentenced to 15 years in prison after pleading guilty to stalking a female acquaintance while on parole for a similar crime that happened in Las Vegas. The Washoe County District Attorney's Office in Reno announced the sentence for 28-year-old Douglas Eugene Jackson on Friday. Jackson was arrested in Florence, Arizona in January and pleaded guilty to the aggravated stalking charge in July. According to prosecutors, an investigation by the Sparks Police Department determined Jackson had sent numerous threatening text messages to a woman over several months in 2019. The texts included threats against the woman's dog and property. He also called the woman's family and friends in an effort to get information about her. At the time of the threats, Jackson was on parole for stalking a former girlfriend in Las Vegas. That woman ended up shooting him at her home. Editor's note: this was OOP in 2014. He served about 5 years in prison after OOP shot him, per the website. If you search his name, his details come up. According to the district attorney's office, prosecutor Travis Lucia sought a maximum sentence because of the terrifying nature of Jackson's conduct, which came after only a month on parole for the previous crime. Jackson was living in Washoe County at the time of the threats, but had no steady address. In 2023, a woman on TikTok claimed to be the OOP from 2014. There was an article written about that September 20th, 2023, 9 years later. Deja Washington was 22 years old when she agreed to go on a date with a man. After the second date, she decided she wasn't really feeling it and told him. In a post to TikTok, she has since revealed how just 3 weeks of knowing the man turned into her being stalked for a whopping 7 months. In a video uploaded to her TikTok account, /Deja does it. Washington says she had a lot of other stuff going on at the time and explained this to her date, who said it was okay. Washington walked away from the connection thinking everything was fine. But a month and a half later, and the date had very much changed his tune. Washington's date later decided that everything was not fine and began messaging her hundreds of times a day. He argued he was a good man and deserved a chance. At first I blew it off and I was kind of annoyed. I was like, who do you think you are? But then it started to get really scary really quickly. He started sending me pictures of the outside of my house, telling me that he was planning a raid. Washington received messages and calls from the man for over a month and started filing police reports, the man taking pictures of her doing so and of her talking to the police. Washington explains he would even talk to strangers and her neighbors, so she couldn't trust anybody. She eventually had to move out of her apartment because a restraining order truly is just a piece of paper, left unable to sleep because he would threaten he was outside and was planning to break in. Washington claims she went to the police 5-10 times and filed like 10 police reports, but says she was told there wasn't anything they could do as he hadn't hurt her in the sage. She eventually moved house, but her stalker posed as her former landlord, used packages in social media to try and track her down. The man threatened to kill her and said he knew he was going to get away with it because he was a white man and she was a black woman. Washington was later assigned a detective to her case, but the first time she met him, she says he revealed he'd met her stalker, who seemed like a nice guy and suggested it could be a misunderstanding. I knew in that moment, this man was going to kill me and he was going to get away with it. Washington's stalker changed phone numbers and even used Duolingo to try contact her, and it was when Washington registered to vote, he finally found her address. She resolved to buy a firearm despite being very anti-guns after her parents were shot when she was younger. The man kept demanding they meet, threatening if Washington didn't, he would grate her and use her blood as lube, and frequently turned up at her door, dodging police. But suddenly, he went completely quiet. In September, he came for her, kicking her door in. Washington said, "I remember just grabbing my firearm off the table, and I wasn't angry, I wasn't upset. I had just made a decision that it's either him or it's me, and I choose me. And I shot him." The police later found Washington's stalker, his injuries leaving him unable to run, and he was sentenced to jail. Washington went on to work at a gun range and took part in Refuse to be a Victim courses to help other women feel empowered to protect themselves. She now works at a big tech company and never takes any moment of life for granted. Washington's stalker, Douglas Eugene Jackson, was sentenced to 15 years in prison in 2020. On the subreddit r/AskReddit, a user posted a thread titled, "Reddit, what is your most disturbing, scary, or creepy real story? Serious?" There were a few interesting replies to this post, so we are gonna read them. A user replied, "A few summers ago, I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to ride back by myself. Because of construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk, but the streets were dead, but it wasn't a problem until right where I was about to turn left onto my street. There was this man walking by himself, maybe 40s, a little scruffy, but not homeless. The sidewalk was narrow, and I didn't want to freak him out, so when I got about 6 feet behind him, I said, 'Hey, behind you!' And he turned around and gave me this super angry look. I turned down me street, and he started to follow me, literally screaming about how I was a fucking and he was going to kill me and all that. I live right off the corner, and I didn't want him to figure that out, so I decided to do another loop around the block. That's not the scary part. The scary part is that when I looped back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my front stoop, staring out at the street like the mother knew I lived there. He saw me ride by again, but he didn't say anything. I ended up going back to the friends, but my bike got stolen from the alleyway by the house 2 days later. Edit. The guy in question was definitely not actually homeless. We have a large population of mentally ill in that area, unfortunately, downtown of a medium-sized city, so if I didn't think the sidewalk was too narrow to pass, otherwise I wouldn't have disturbed him. Half the scary part was that he looked pretty much completely normal for my area. That being said, I ended up texting my mom and she made the decision not to notify law enforcement until my bike was stolen. Another user replied with their own story. I was delivering a hot tub to this contractor realtor in this fancy gated community near Branson, Missouri. When I arrived, the construction workers were in charge of telling me where the thing was supposed to go. It was going on the 4th floor balcony, but because of the way the house was built, the 4th floor was ground floor. The other 3 floors were on the side of a hill, but the driveway was even with the first 4th floor entrance, if that makes sense. So, a lot of construction going on, but to get the hot tub on the balcony, I had to make a ramp, take it from the drive, down into the yard, up a ramp to the porch, through the living room door, across the living room, out the back patio doors, onto the deck. Problem with this was, the deck was unfinished. A huge section of decking was missing. They had literally installed only enough decking so that I could go from the patio doors to the far corner of the deck where the hot tub would sit. There was no railing. The hot tub weighed 900 pounds, and it was a 4-story drop if I fell. The construction workers volunteered to help me. We got it out onto the deck, crossed the narrow bridge of installed decking to the corner, and I was about to lay it down. You move these on a dolly while the hot tub is on its edge for clarification. Laying it down isn't that hard. You tilt it, bring it down to your lap, grab the strap securing it to the dolly, and lower it to the deck. It's very controlled, and I'd done it thousands of times. However, this deck wasn't finished, so the contractor wanted to leave it on its edge. It's a lot harder to take it off when it's standing up because the dolly is under a 900-pound tub. But I've done it before. I told them that we would have to put blocks under one side of the dolly, tilt the tub, and pop the straps to release the dolly so it could be removed from the area. Then you tilt the hot tub back, remove the blocks, and then set the hot tub down on the deck. Problem: the deck wasn't wide enough to allow me to do this safely. I popped the strap on the hot tub, put the blocks under, and I tilted the hot tub, but that put me with my feet 4 inches from the edge of the deck, with nothing but 4 stories of air behind me. We were able to free the dolly on one side, but not the other. The hot tub had to be leaned over further toward me. I tell everyone to freeze, and they do. I didn't want anyone messing with it because I had to shift my feet back 5 inches, so my heels were off the deck. I'm freaking out, but it's all going smooth. I have a construction worker on each side of me helping support the tub, 3 construction workers freeing the dolly, and 1 useless worker playing with the strap that is going to secure the tub to the house so that the wind doesn't blow the tub over. We are inches from having the dolly freed when one of the construction workers freeing the dolly gets impatient and kicks the corner of the tub to dislodge it from the dolly. It works for him, but unfortunately for me, I didn't have my feet set yet. I shout that I'm falling. The 2 guys beside me take the weight of the tub, but no one can get to me. My arms are windmilling. I'm bent almost double backwards, trying my damnedest to stay on the deck. I can see the boulders down below out of the corner of my eye. I'm falling, and there isn't anything I can do about it. I feel myself go. I'm falling. My heels slip out from under me, and no one can reach me. But then suddenly, I'm flying forward. Something is under the small of my back, and it's slamming me into the bottom of the tub. The dolly is removed, and the tub stood up with me hugging it, before I find out what saved me. The useless guy playing with the strap had already secured one end to the house. When I fell, the strap was already behind me, hanging off the deck. The construction worker pulled it tight with all his might, arresting my fall. It wasn't there for that purpose, but he saved my life that day. I would have been dead if not for him. I thanked him by sending him and his wife and kid to Breckenridge, Colorado for Christmas. It was actually a vacation I'd saved for and was about to surprise my wife and daughter with, but I felt he deserved it more. Plus, my wife and daughter didn't know anything about it. Yeah, that was one of my most scariest moments ever. Let's hear some more replies now. This is not supernatural creepy, but is one of the more disturbing and surreal experiences of my life. One early morning a few short years ago, I am walking to my bus stop and eating a banana. It is dark, misty, around 5 a.m., and I am internally debating something trivial, like if I want my daily Starbucks before or after the commute. As I approach the dimly lit corner on my street, a tall man in a black mask steps out of the dark alleyway to my left. Sleepy and disoriented, I barely acknowledge him. When he shouts, "Put down your purse," and points his gun to my head, things start to click. The man says, "Put down your bags," and I tell him, Okay, I'm putting them down over here." He orders me to walk over to him, toward the alley, and get down on the fucking ground, and I agree. I'm coming, okay. My heart is beating a million miles a minute, and my hands still smell sticky with banana. I know I need to get away. I don't know why, but my mouth won't stop working. "Look, see, I'm on the ground. My stuff is over there. Please just take my stuff." But he doesn't like it. "Shut the up, okay?" He gets on top of me and puts the gun to my head. At this point, I should mention the fact that I'm on my way to coach a high school practice and I'm dressed like a dude. Huge baggy pants, hat, jacket. If not for my telltale voice, I'd look like a prepubescent 90s rap star. Anyway, as the guy gets on top of me, gun to my head, he looks at me and pauses. I can't tell you why I know this, but I swear that at this moment, it clicks for him that I'm a woman. He gets off of me, stands up, and points to the dark alley. "Come with me." My stomach hurts. I remember that there have been a recent rash of assaults in my neighborhood, during the daytime, no less. When the man points down that dirty alleyway, my internal voice speaks up, says voice one. "There was no way in hell you were going to go down there without a fight." "But he has a gun, you dipshit," replies voice two. "Follow me," the real voice, his voice, hollers. So I do what I do best. I talk. "I'm coming. I'm following you," I call. And the man makes a crucial mistake. He believes me. I take 1-2 tiny steps backwards toward the sidewalk, and he turns his body and his gun toward the alley. This is my moment. I take a deep breath, tuck my head down in case he starts shooting, and start sprinting away. I hear a voice screaming in a high-pitched wail before I realize that it's mine. After running 6 or 7 blocks, I head back to my apartment, hoping he's not there to see where I lived. The police check out the alleyway an hour later, but the potential attacker is long gone. The only evidence of the encounter is my banana peel browning in the alleyway and the adrenaline rush that I couldn't shake for days. I would be lying if I said that if that experience doesn't bother me still. But I'm so fortunate to mainly be haunted by the what-ifs and not the what-dids. When I was in high school, I had a really good friend who lived next door to a house that was always up for sale. People would move out in the middle of the night without a word, and it hadn't had the same owner for more than 6 months straight for a couple of years. One night, we were really bored, and he suggested we go explore the house next door since it had sat empty for a while. We go around back, and there's a dog door that he can crawl through, and he unlocks the door and lets me in. The house itself is really unremarkable. It looked like it was built in maybe the 1950s and was a craftsman-style house in an older, nicer part of town. My friend's house was similarly built. The kitchen had a really nice built-in breakfast table set against a picture window. The house's electricity was off, but you could see the streetlight through the window. My friend and I sit down on the floor across from this table and are just hanging out, talking. Why? Who knows? All of a sudden, my friend screams, and in that instant, my vision goes black. But it wasn't that, I just couldn't see. My body was engulfed in this sickly coldness from head to toe. I start screaming, and I feel my friend's hand grabbing mine and pulling me in some direction forcefully. My vision slowly comes back, and I start to warm up when I realize that we're outside under the streetlight. It was December, and should have been much warmer inside of that house. Finally, I look at my friend, and he looks scared. I'm really confused and kind of panicked myself, and finally ask him what happened. He says that as I was talking, a black thing, this figure that was all black and only had the vague shape of a girl, crawled out from under the table and sat on top of me. Apparently, I started groping around with my eyes wide open, like I couldn't see, and he was so freaked out, he pulled me out of the house. We're still friends and we bring it up every now and then, but the story itself never changes and it still sends chills down my spine. To this day, I've never felt such blackness or coldness in my life. It was palpable, almost sticky. For a couple of days afterward, I couldn't shake this unsettling feeling, and I could never walk past that house again. I'm scared to get out of bed now. Okay, next story. Every time I stay at my grandma's house, I hear someone walking upstairs. It starts at one side of the room, casually walks to the other and stops. This will happen maybe twice a night. I didn't start hearing it until I was about 14 when my grandparents made me start sleeping in a different room on the first floor because they started sleeping in separate bedrooms. Blah, blah, blah. Regardless, both of their rooms are also on the first floor. For a little backstory, I have always been afraid of the upstairs at their house. I don't know why, but it's always freaked me out, and I refuse to ever go up there alone. I'm 23 now, still won't go up alone. There's one room specifically, though. It's a long, narrow bedroom. When you open the door, there are closets on your left and right, a bed placed roughly in the middle of the room, and a window on the far side opposite the door. I was told growing up by my grandparents that the sons of the previous owner claimed to see a gorilla come out of the closet at night, dance around the room, and go back into the closet. I thought nothing of the story until I had to start sleeping in the other room, the room located directly below the scary room upstairs. So, we all go to bed. All the lights in the house are off and I'm still awake, lying on the bed. Then I heard it, thump, 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 starting at one end of the room upstairs. It got closer to me, passed right above me, and continued to the end of the room where it stopped. I'm wide awake, terrified out of my mind. It was no question to me that I had heard footsteps. I knew that slow, casual pace. I was freaked out and went to my grandpa's room. I told him what I heard. He told me that the house is old and it creaks. But he turned the dining room light on for me, so I felt a little safer. I tried going back to sleep. Then it started again, this time from where it ended the first time by the window upstairs. It walks over me again and stops when it reached the door. I thought it was over until 5 seconds later when I heard it coming down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Silence as it reached the landing. Then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And silence again as it reached the first floor. I was frozen in shock. Whatever it was on my floor of the house and sadly unaffected by dining room light. I was staring at the doorway to my room. The dining room light was shining in, and my vision began to distort. I felt dizzy with fear, so I pulled the blankets over my head and suddenly heard a scratching sound from inside my room. I knew exactly where it was coming from too, my grandpa's gun case. It was a very obvious sound, scratching on the wood. Long scratches down the front of the gun case door. I could even hear the door, ever so slightly tapping against the frame as each scratch began. I tried to scream, and I couldn't. I took a second to take a deep breath and let out a loud scream. In seconds, my grandpa had made it to my room, and I was relieved. Needless to say, he still didn't believe me. So I did what any normal person would do. I draped a sheet over the side of the bed and slept underneath it. I wrapped myself tight in a comforter, put on headphones, and turned my back to the door. There could be a party of ghosts in my room and I wouldn't even know. The next morning, my grandpa told my grandma about what happened the night before. She said, "Oh, that's silly. You know, your cousin woke me up the last time she stayed here. She came in my room saying, "I hear footsteps." I slept under the bed for the rest of my week stay with them. I've stayed there countless times since that happened, and I hear the footsteps every time. I sleep on top of the bed now, but keep my back to the door and sleep with headphones on. I haven't heard it come down the stairs since that first night. But if it does, I don't want to know. Okay, on to the next one. Bit late to the thread, so OP, you're probably going to be the only one that reads this. Hi, it's along the same theme as your story. When I was a kid, I used to take a long time to get to sleep. One night when I was about 8, I remember turning over in my bed, and there, standing nonchalantly, was a soldier. He was in full color, but clearly not solid. I remember it clearly, and I would now say that he was in the World War I era. He just looked at me with no expression, and I remember being really surprised that I wasn't at all scared, but really calm. It felt like passing an old friend on the street and giving a polite nod. I know about sleep paralysis, but it goes on. A few years later, I was folding clothes in my room. I have a small room off my bedroom that's half closet, half study room. I looked up, and right through that room strolled a soldier in a very old dress. Far older dress than the one I'd seen years before. He looked at me with a sort of nearly cheeky smile. Again, I was shocked that I wasn't scared at all. Even though I didn't understand it, I felt very calm. During these years, I used to struggle with a recurring dream. I'd be lying in a field that was completely churned up, unable to get up as I'd been badly hurt in my lower back, with my legs covered in blood. In the dream, I know I am just waiting to die, and the battle has moved on away from this field. Then, a soldier, World War I era, comes running past me. I raise a handgun, level it at his chest, and fire. He collapses down near me, and we make eye contact. He looks at me with such hatred, a real why. Look. He raises the rifle he was carrying and aims right at my head. I deliberately don't even try to move. I remember the eye contact once more, and me trying to convey to him that I was sorry, and to go ahead. Then I'm aware of him about to fire. Then I'd wake up gasping and drenched in sweat. This dream stopped in my mid-teens. Fast forward to when I'm 19, I slipped on some steps and broke a bone in my lower lumbar spine. I remember lying in a hospital bed in so much pain I could barely breathe. Doctors and nurses and patients were walking past, going about their business. Then 2 soldiers walk in. They don't say anything, but are in formal dress and come over to my bed and take off their hats. They stand there for several minutes, just smiling encouragingly, and then nod and slowly fade. I don't know what happened, because I'm not a crier, but I burst into tears. It wasn't anything to do with the pain, but I ended up just sobbing for about an hour. I felt this absolutely tremendous relief inside me, as if I'd been burdened by a guilt for my entire life that had just been released. I'll end the story with the part which keeps me from questioning if I'm crazy. My mother used to be friends with a man who claimed to be a shaman. I never bought into any of that stuff, and before I met him, I used to tease my mom for believing anything he said. The first time he met me, he looked at me for a minute without saying anything. His eyes were extremely piercing. He then said, "Christ, you've been busy in your time. You're surrounded by soldiers, a lot of soldiers, from a lot of history." It kind of made me feel better, as I'd sort of assumed I had something wrong with me. Then, when my younger brother started having imaginary friends at about 3, he used to always mention the big men with funny clothes that would walk with me from time to time. There's been multiple other bits and pieces of related things that have happened to me growing up, but it'd take all day to write it all out. Anyway, hopefully you took something from reading. Edit, a few people are asking for a bit more info. I do have a few more incidences that are quite interesting. It was a crazy phase of my life that I'm glad happened, but I'm also very glad it seems to be mostly over. Naturally, I've never talked about this before outside my family. Actually, feels quite good to have shared it. I'm a bit busy with studying right now, but I'll write a bit more tomorrow when I have time. I'll reply to any comments below to let you guys know. I appreciate nobody calling me insane. It's why I don't talk about it. Pretty much because if none of it happened to me, I don't think I'd believe it. Here's another reply. Okay, this is 100% true. I'm 23 now, and this happened about 10 years ago, so I was probably 13 or 14. Anyway, I used to skateboard all the time with my friends Tim and Brandon. One day, we got done skating and we decided to go to 7-Eleven to get some food drinks before we went home. Remember, I was only 13/14, so we weren't driving. We had skated to the 7-Eleven and were planning on walking back home. Anyway, we buy our drinks and we left the store. We walked to the parking lot's exit and prepared to cross the highway. It's not a bus highway, since it's a small town. While we waited for the traffic light to turn red so that we could cross, I looked behind me at the 7-Eleven gas pumps. I noticed a 50-year-old man pumping gas into his white truck. He stared at me, and before I knew it, he dropped the gas pump and jumped into his truck. He slammed on the gas and sped straight at my friends and I. He missed us, but he grazed my arm and knocked my skateboard out of my hand. My friend Brandon screamed, "What the f***? You f***ing d***," as the man peeled out and sped into the parking lot next to 7-Eleven. I swear to God, he drove through a ditch, which was between 7-Eleven's parking lot and the parking lot he was in, and tried to run us over again. This is where it got bad. The three of us started running at full speed across the highway and toward the local library, which is like 2-3 blocks from 7-Eleven's. When we were about 1/2 block away, I looked back and saw the maniac speeding toward us, full of rage. Brandon and Tim ran up to the library doors, and I ran towards the woods. It was Sunday, so I knew the library was closed, and there was a trail in the woods which led to my backyard. Meanwhile, this maniac peeled into the parking lot and hopped out of his truck. I looked behind me before escaping into the woods and saw him grab either a shotgun or a crowbar. I was pretty far away at this point, and I was freaking out, so my vision wasn't great, from the bed of his truck. I ran all the way home. When I got to my street, my neighbor, Tim's dad, told me to get in his car because we had to go to the video store, which is where Tim's mom worked. When I got there, I found Tim and Brandon. They ran to the video store after realizing that the library was closed, and 3 cops. A minute later, my mom came in, crying her eyes out, because Brandon and Tim told her they didn't know if I lived or not. Everyone had thought that I was captured. Tim told me that he saw the guy running after me into the woods, which is scary because I thought the maniac was chasing them, not me. Anyway, he was never caught, and I spent the next 5 years worrying about every white truck I saw. Edit. I forgot the most scary part. My town is small, but it's not empty. There were plenty of people around while this was going on. I felt so helpless, running for my life, while there were at least 100 people around, not doing a thing about it. Also, to be clear, we didn't provoke this man at all. He tried to hit us for no reason, and that's creepy. Brandon called him, but that was after he tried to run us over. We were good kids trying to walk home, and we almost died, got seriously hurt because of it. Also, the bus highway equals to busy highway. Okay, let's hear one more interesting story. So, my uncle used to work a lot when I was younger. He's done a lot of different things to make money, but one consistent thing is that in the summer months and into late fall, he paints houses. It's a legitimate business and everything. He's got a truck with a number and a name and supplies in the back. The works. Every now and then, he would call my dad when he needed a little extra help and I'd work for him. No big deal, really. It's just painting houses. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it takes a while to paint a whole house. If the weather conditions aren't right, then you can't paint. One particular fall was extremely wet. It rained what felt like every single day. My uncle would paint multiple houses at a time, so sometimes he would get caught up due to situations like these, and I'd work a little more than usual. That was fine by me though. The job wasn't hard, and it paid well. Anyway, it was a warm day for late fall, but there was still a distinct chill in the air, one that kinda penetrated through you and stung your soul. My uncle had this job he had to finish. It was an old Victorian house in a quiet part of town. A lady and her husband, who was an author, lived there. Due to the weather, it had taken longer than expected to paint the house, and there were family issues going on at the time, which further complicated things. So, my uncle gets a call one day from the lady who lives at the house. She says that her husband is trying to write his next book, but he keeps getting distracted by the scaffolding outside the house, so she wanted to know if we could come over and finish the job as soon as possible. My uncle was always an honest businessman. They had contracted him to do the job in midsummer, but he had lots of jobs that summer, and the wet conditions I mentioned above made it difficult to finish anything. However, these people were insistent but really polite, and not wanting to lose customers or get a bad recommendation, my uncle decided to put the house as a high priority. After all, it would only take a day or two to finish. So we show up to this house mid-afternoon. Like I said, it was a weird, kind of chilly that day, and I also remember a really eerie calm. The day was slightly overcast, so everything was shrouded in gray. It was like the perfect setting for a mystery crime novel. So we arrive at this house, and my uncle and I move to the back. The front of the house was already done, so there was nothing left there. My uncle, being the more experienced painter, would always do the touch-ups, and I would simply apply the first coats, since they took little skill. Anyway, we get to the back of the house, and he asks me if I'm scared of heights. I was 17 at the time, and although they do creep me out a little, I didn't want to seem like a child in front of my uncle, so I told him I wasn't. He was happy to hear that. He has me climb up the scaffold to the 3rd floor to finish an upper section of the house. There was a window up there, a small little oval one that looked into the attic. The attic also happened to be the husband's study. He would do most of his writing in there. So I'm climbing up the scaffolding, cans of paint dangling behind me, and various paintbrushes and other tools in the utility belt my uncle let me borrow. I get to the top of the scaffolding and set all my supplies down. I crack open a can of paint and start painting like I had a few hundred times before. Outside of the temperature, the overcast, and the eerie calm this day was like any other. I'm working my way across the top part of the house when I get to the window that looks into the study. I bend down, dip my paintbrush, and stand back up to paint above the window. The window was in my direct line of sight, and I couldn't help gazing in. I see a man, the husband, staring back at me with a face completely barren of any emotion. I had never seen a face so devoid of feeling before. I still haven't. Of course, I get startled and take a step back. I chuckle and smile at the guy, but he doesn't smile back. Instead, while remaining completely emotionless, he draws a pistol up to his head that he was holding in his hand the whole time and proceeds to blow his brains out without ever making eye contact right in front of me while I'm staring at him. In utter shock, I gasp and let out the smallest scream as I step back in fear. Only, I stepped back a step too much and fell off the scaffolding. Alerted by the gunshot, my uncle looked up in just enough time to see me fall off the scaffolding from the 3rd story. I was lucky enough to land in a bush and only suffer a broken ankle and a few scratches. The biggest wounds happened to my head. I had to go to counseling for a while. It's been years since then, and I still remember that man face. I've never forgotten it. It will always be burned in the back of my head. I know why. Looking back, his face was so devoid of emotion, because he never felt any emotion at all. He literally didn't care about what he was doing. As it turns out, the man was seriously depressed and facing marital issues with his wife. Combined with a few too many nights drunk on whiskey and facing writer's block, I guess he decided he couldn't take it anymore. His wife moved out of the house shortly after, and we never finished the job. To this day, that house remains abandoned, and to this day, I try not to drive down the street it's on. I'm scared that if I do and happen to pass the backyard, I'll see that man staring back at me from that window, cold and emotionless.
Hey, that was all for today. We hope you guys enjoyed this video. Drop a like and comment what you want to see next. And please subscribe to help us reach our goal of hitting 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Peace out.